family has its share of politics. But when you belong to what is arguably one of India's most well-known and perhaps oldest political families, then the politics get all the more interesting. So this week we are going to be taking a look at the political equations within the Nehru-Gandhi clan, and we also have an exclusive interview with Nayantara Sahgal, who, as you know, is late Jawaharlal Nehru's sister Vijay Lakshmi Pandit's daughter. But first, take a look at the equations within the Nehru-Gandhi family. Politics within the Nehru-Gandhi family equation date right back to the time when Vijay Lakshmi Pandit, who was Jawaharlal Nehru's sister, did not get along with Nehru's wife Kamla. In fact, both of Nehru's sisters treated Kamla rather shabbily, and these wives were picked up by an astute Indira, who even at a young age felt protective of her mother. Both aunt and niece had a flair for the political, though Vijay Lakshmi Pandit opted for the global stage and went on to become president of the UN General Assembly, while her niece Indira dominated the domestic politics. You can see the Nehru family charm on display here.
What does the average Indian think of the United Nations?
Well, you know, India is a long way from the United Nations, from New York. And I suppose, to be quite honest, I don't suppose the average Indian has much thought about it. I can tell you what my constituents think, some of them. They write and ask me why I'm not attending to my duties in Parliament instead of sitting here trying to bring peace to the world that doesn't want peace.
Not very different from an American reaction. Very
I
quick.
don't know. I think people are pretty much the same all over.
However, relationship between aunt and niece did not improve after Nehru's death, when Vijay Lakshmi Pandit contested from Nehru's old seat Phulpur. But the breakdown point was the emergency, for both Vijay Lakshmi and her daughter Nayantara Sahgal were extremely vocal in their criticism, with the aunt even campaigning against her niece in the 1977 elections.
People who were arrested for ordinary crimes pretended they were political prisoners, and I've just seen in a book that's recently come out somebody being defended as a person of integrity, whereas we know he was arrested for stealing something and trying to smuggle out a very precious book, a Quran, by the way, which belonged to the time of Emperor Akbar of the Mughals, of smuggling it out of the country. Now, in fact, it's my aunt who's presented him in her book as a man of integrity who's being punished during the emergency.
What's the name of that book?
The Scope of Happiness.
By who?
Mrs. Pandit.
Later on, another Nehru cousin, Arun Nehru, who was also a close confidant of Rajiv Gandhi, fell out with the family and joined the BJP. Yet, when Arun Nehru died last year, it was Priyanka's son Rehan who lit the funeral pyre.
Well, I think they have great sense of solidarity, and I think they may have some occasional fights, but they are one unit. That's the Nehru-Gandhi family, and they got the DNA of that family, so they're very aware of that.
There seems to be an unwritten rule in family politics where certain lines are not crossed. For instance, take the estrangement between Sanjay Gandhi's family and Rajiv's family. Except for Menaka, the rest of the family stays away from personal attacks and no one campaigns in each other's constituencies.
अंतर्राष्ट्रीय अखबारों का कहना है कि कांग्रेस की अध्यक्षा जो विदेश से आई थी और जिसको देश ने इतना प्यार दिया और गले से लगा करके इतनी छूट दी, आज दुनिया में छठे नंबर पर सबसे अमीर औरत है। मैं पूछती हूँ, दहेज में तो एक पैसा नहीं लाई थी, तो ये अगर दुनिया में छठे नंबर पर सबसे अमीर औरत है तो कहाँ से पैसा आए?
In fact, while Varun did contest from Sultanpur, which is considered a Nehru-Gandhi stronghold that traditionally votes Congress, his cousins did not campaign against him. Varun returned the gesture in his own way by praising the work done by his cousin in Amethi.
हम 2013 के हिंदुस्तान में हमको लघु उद्योग चाहिए, स्मॉल स्केल इंडस्ट्रीज चाहिए, जैसे कि हम लोग ये सोचें कि सेल्फ हेल्प ग्रुप्स जैसे राहुल जी ने अमेठी में सफलतापूर्वक वो उदाहरण तो मैं नहीं यहाँ ले सकता हूँ, मैंने उनका काम नीचे से नहीं देखा.
Well, you know, the relationship between Manika and Sonia is different, but with Varun and Rahul is much more fluid. And Manika is the outsider. Varun is the son of Sanjay. So I think when Varun wanted to join the Congress, as you know, they said, you can join, but your mother is not acceptable. But they said, we want to come as a joint package.
More recently, when Natwar Singh revealed in his book that it was Rahul and not Sonia's inner voice that stopped her from becoming Prime Minister, Nayantara Sahgal did not join the chorus against the Gandhis but defended Rahul's wishes.
Any son would feel the same way. I don't think it's at all surprising that Rahul felt that way. In those days, one was always thinking about this fact of assassination. So naturally, he would advise his mother not to step into the public limelight to that extent.
And so the power play continues inside one of India's most powerful dynasties as it grapples with a much larger issue, that of its very survival. Both Nayantara Sahgal and her mother Vijay Lakshmi Pandit have had a very hot and cold equation with Indira Gandhi. In fact, Nayantara Sahgal in her books has been critical of Indira Gandhi, particularly regarding the emergency. And although she lives in Dehradun, she is here in Delhi for a book launch. And this is where we caught up with her to talk about the state of the Congress today and also her volatile relationship with a very famous cousin. Welcome to NewsX, ma'am.
Thank you.
And you have another book coming up. I must congratulate you on the book launch. That's Political Imagination, is that right?
That's what it's called, yes.
Okay, but before we move on to that, I'll just take you a bit into the past. You know, I was looking at these two books. You know, it's two alone and not together. You and your cousin didn't really get along.
You know, that's quite untrue. We were very close. When I was a child, she was 10 years older than me, so we did not grow up together. Right. She was abroad in Switzerland and England at the time when I was growing up in Anand Bhavan. But when she used to be at home, she would help me with my arithmetic, which was terrible. She was a very loving cousin. And after I came home from college, I was in college in America at Wellesley. And when I came home, I came straight to my uncle's home. He had then become Prime Minister. It was 2 months after partition. I had no other home. He was my surrogate father. My mother was in Moscow as ambassador. My father had died in 1944 of his last jail term. And so I came there to live with my uncle here in Delhi at 17 York Road.
So then when did things, sour between you? Because there is a lot of criticism of her, of the emergency especially.
Well, that was the time, a little before that, because I was writing political commentary, mostly for the Indian Express at that time, over many years. But, well, that was the time, a little before that, because I was writing political commentary, mostly for the Indian Express at that time, over many years. But I felt there was an authoritarian streak in some of her policies and the way she was running the party, the way she was running the country. And frankly, I felt it was my plain duty to point that out in my articles and to come out strongly against that trend.
Do you regret that? Because your mother at one point said that you had been too harsh on her. Is that correct?
I want to make a distinction between the personal and the political. At no time did I want to oppose her on a personal level, nor did I. She had been a very loving cousin. I had been her favorite young cousin. We had got along very well indeed, and it almost broke my heart when she began to become what I felt was a really authoritarian Prime Minister, and at that time to push Sanjay Gandhi forward as her successor. I thought it was a very dangerous trend for democracy. This and many other things which I wrote about. I can't even begin to go into all the subjects I went into. One was her attempt to control freedom of the press at that time, which later became censorship during the emergency. all these things, I, with my upbringing and my standards, and indeed which she had shared, I had to oppose them. So at the political level, yes, I did oppose her. Over and over again I have thought about it, and I felt I couldn't have done differently. But I have always regretted the personal break, because we were one family and we had been close.
But you know, there is a strong sense of Nehru-Gandhi family sense of unity. You know, whatever the differences are. For instance, we saw Arun Nehru disagreeing with Sonia Gandhi and taking them on. But at the end of the day, at his funeral, when he was dying, it was Priyanka's son who lit the fire. Sonia and Priyanka went and met him. So do you get that sense that there is somewhere beyond which you don't go? And
who did you say lit the fire?
Priyanka's son, Rehan, Arun Nehru's fire.
You know, I have to again make a distinction here between the family, in quotes, as represented by Jawaharlal Nehru, to which I belong, and the family that it then became, from which we were isolated, my mother and I, and not so much my sisters, because their husbands were working in the foreign service, and so they were not involved in this. We were cut off after my uncle's time by my cousin because of my opposition to her politically, and my mother also came out against the emergency. So we never came to know the family as it is today. Sonia, of course, I know because I was at her wedding. Rajiv was very close to my mother, and he was a very also loving and warm individual, stayed very close to us. But the present generation, I can't say that I know at all.
You've never met Rahul or Priyanka? Or
I met Rahul and Priyanka when they were children, but not after that, no.
But as a political watcher, as an analyst, how do you see the state of Congress today, and how much would you say, what needs to be done to make a change? People are saying it's time for Priyanka to take over, for instance.
No, as I told you, I was opposing dynasty since the time when Indira Gandhi tried to push Sanjay forward, and he would have become her successor had he lived. I think it's wrong. I think that whole trend has been very dangerous to democracy, and it is not in the Congress tradition. Congress is a historic democratic party, which the Congress, which was led by Mahatma Gandhi, was a democratic party under which my uncle trained, under which my parents trained. There was no room for family rule or anything of that kind in it. And my uncle would have been appalled, I think, at the developments that later took place. I think it's been an unfortunate trend, because it's a great party with a countrywide reach, and I think a vast number of talented people. You see them sometimes even now. At least I do on the screen, giving their views. There's absolutely no reason why they could not come forward and play their role in a much more important way.
So do you think there is a time for a change of leadership for the Congress right now?
Well, I'm not even a member of the Congress. I'm not a member of any political party. But it is for the party to make these decisions. And if the party doesn't, who am I or who is anybody to advise?
Fair enough, but as someone who's associated with the family, for instance, how do you see Varun's move to join the BJP? Do you think that was a good idea?
My dear, I'm appalled. The BJP is not in my tradition. Everything it stands for, and particularly today, when it is, how shall I say, ruled, at least in some subterranean fashion, by the RSS, I think is a very dangerous trend for India. And, well, if Varun chooses to join, that's his lookout. But the BJP is certainly not a party that I could ever vote for.
So you still see Congress as the best solution for India's problems today?
Let me let you into a secret. I come from Uttarakhand, and in our election there, I voted for Aam Aadmi.
Oh, so you're
And I'll tell you why.
alternative.
No,
Why?
because some of us met, some of us who were all very concerned with the way things were going, and we met before the election to form what we thought of as an anti-Modi brigade.
Really?
And we thought the best way to deal with the situation was to vote for the most likely person to win that we were being offered. And at that time, of course, it turned out wrong. It turned out to be the Aam Aadmi person who seemed more inclined to get the most votes, to stop Modi. And that's why I voted for Aam Aadmi.
Moving on, I can see there is still that old Nayantara Sahgal, the one who protested against the emergency. Now you are turning that into a protest against Modi's rule. So there is that political spark, that political
But there's a difference. There's a difference. Indira Gandhi departed from a great democratic tradition when she went in for authoritarian rule. Modi is in line with the whole tradition of the Hindutva brigade, the RSS and so on. He's not departed from it. He's very much part of it. And I feel that some people have said to me that people voted for Modi in spite of the massacre of 02. And I always feel that those who voted for him because of the massacre. I think that he created, excuse me, a trend in this country which is very dangerous for this country. A leader can bring out the best or the worst in people. And I think he's bringing out the worst.
But how do you see Sonia Gandhi? A lot of people see her mother-in-law in her. Do you see anything of Indira in Sonia?
No, I think, people have this tendency to say these glib things. After all, what model had she to follow? She was a girl from Italy who married an Indian, made this her home. Her whole political education, as it were, came from within Indira Gandhi's and her family and what Indira was doing at the time. Who else could she follow? That would be her model. For her, that
There
was
is
the
a
Congress.
subconscious influence, definitely, or a very
No,
conscious
it was very
one, maybe.
conscious. There's nothing sub about it. Indira Gandhi was leader of this country, a very popular leader, and up to the time when things went very wrong, and after the time when she brought the Congress back, she was a very powerful and very popular leader. There's no getting away from that. Sonia had that model before her.
And has she followed it well, do you think?
I think she's worked very hard. I have great admiration for the hard work she put in to get to know this country from end to end. I don't think Prime Minister Manmohan Singh travelled as much in this country as Sonia has done. She didn't know Hindi. She made a great effort to learn it. She got up on the public platform, a woman who had never stepped out of private life. She got up on the public platform to speak in Hindi, however stilted. Never mind, she made that effort. I admire her for all that. And twice over, she brought the Congress back to power. So she had done her homework, she had come to know her job, and she had done her best to acquit herself well.
You think she's done her mother-in-law proud?
Well, I think she did her party proud, which is much more important at the time when she could bring it back to power.
But today, how do you think in terms of its thinking? There's a whole thing that the Congress has become too socialist. It's become, they need to change their outlook. Because Modi is being seen as, because he's friendly to the corporates. This is what the country wants right now.
See, this didn't happen in Modi's time. It happened in Narasimha Rao's time, who was Prime Minister of the Congress. He brought about the change. The change could have come much earlier. It could have come before.
Rajiv tried.
Rajiv tried to some extent, and he died too young. He didn't have a chance to go on. So, it was coming along, it was seen as having to be done. It wasn't able to fructify until Narasimha Rao. And it's not an entirely new situation. This idea that yes, we're now globalized and we need to adjust in many directions accordingly. It's common sense. I always have to emphasize that Nehru was not an ist of any kind. He didn't believe in any ism. He was at base a practical man who did what had to be done in his time. And had he been living 10 years or 15 years on, he would have done what was required then.
Do you regret the distance between, for instance, the distance between Indira Gandhi and your mother was there from the very beginning? Indira Gandhi felt that, her aunt didn't like her, or there was this... and there's that famous incident later on when I think Mrs. Pandit's, when she was being sent again as High Commissioner to London, a lot of people wanted her. She went and met Indira Gandhi, and Indira turned around and said, well, Phuphi, I don't really trust you.
There's a mistake there. That's not a correct story.
What is the correct story?
Because my mother had already had 2 terms in London in my uncle's time. She didn't want to go back. She didn't want to be sent abroad anywhere. She had come back to India because she wanted to come back into Indian politics. Instead of that, she was appointed governor of Maharashtra. I'm speaking of now, not earlier when she stood for parliament in the early 50s. She was twice elected to the Lok Sabha then. Later, when she returned from her UK assignment, where she didn't want to be governor at all, when Mamu died, when my uncle died, she immediately resigned from the governorship to stand for parliament from his constituency in Phulpur and won it for the Congress. So, and she never wanted to go back as High Commissioner or Ambassador anywhere abroad. It was my cousin, Indira, who then said to her, well, Phuphi, I've been thinking, would you like to go to Paris? And my mother said, no, I don't want to go out of the country.
But did she at any point say, I don't really trust you? That's...
In connection with being in the country. You see?
She didn't want her in domestic politics.
She didn't want her on the political scene in the country.
Looking back, do you feel that there was any way you could have played this difference? Any of you could have played and been more closer? Where did the miss happen between?
Where did?
Exactly where the relationship went wrong. Is there any one moment or one fact that you can pinpoint and say if we hadn't?
I pinpoint it exactly to the time when I began writing my criticisms of her in my political articles. That is when it happened.
That is when
she felt I pinpoint it exactly to the time when I began writing my criticisms of her in my political articles. That is when it happened.
That is when
she felt I was against her. She was a person who, once she got into power, she felt you either had to be for her or against her. And she didn't like her own kin, her kith and kin, to be against her. So,
you never wanted to join politics yourself?
No.
You never ever?
Never. I never had that instinct or desire for politics. I was very, very interested in politics. I was steeped in politics from my childhood on, and therefore politics forms the background of all my novels and the subject of all my non-fiction. In that way, I've been very political all my life. But I never wanted to be in any party or in any political position.
Much rather be a commentator.
As a writer, I've been an observer, of human nature mostly, as novelists are. Other than that, of my country, which I felt always passionately close to and part of because of my upbringing, and where my country was going, how it was developing from independence on. And that is the if I can call it that, a chronological progression of my novels, where India was at that time. In a sense, India was my main character always. You know. So it's been a deep involvement in my country, and in that sense I was political, yes.
You know, your latest book finally is a collection of essays and letters. What would you say is, looking back on your life, what would you say which part of your life had the most profound impact on you? Something
Had the most
profound impact on you? Was it, as a young student?
Well, you know what the Jesuits have always said is that give us a child until the age of 7, and what we teach him, he will never depart from. So I would call my childhood the most powerful influence on my whole life, because the way I was brought up, the ideals I was brought up with, the values I was brought up with, Mahatma Gandhi, and violence, all these things became part of my DNA. And I could never leave them. I've always felt that was my strength. I've grown up on that. I've lived my life on that basis, and still do.
Well, we're going to end with one last question. Speaking of DNA, do you see some reconciliation? Do you see yourself meeting Rahul, Priyanka at any time?
Well, as I say, I've never met them, not for any desire on my part not to meet them. I've never been invited to meet them. I've met Sonia, I've been in touch with her, and I've known her. But her children I have not known because of the developments I've been telling you about.
Okay, we're going to end with that. But thank you and wish you all the best for your new book.
Thank you.
And thank you for talking to NewsX. Well, who would say that she is all of 87 years old? As you can see, Nayantara Sahgal is as candid and as forthright in person as she is in all of her books. But that's all from us this week. Thank you for watching Cover Story, and we'll see you again same time next week.